Hello, everyone. Welcome to those of you who are trickling in. Thank you for joining us. Um, we're going to let folks trickle in for about 60 seconds here, just the first minute, and then we'll get started. And in the meantime, if you just want to pop into the comments section where you're joining us from, that'd be great. Here, Rochester, New York, UK. I'm in Bethlehem, PA, near Allentown. I'll just give another welcome as our numbers are going up here. We're just going to give it a few more seconds and then we'll get kicked off as folks trickle in. Thank you for joining us. Hey, Allentown, just a few minutes from me. Just pop into the chat where you're joining us from while we wait. We're going to get started in just a second here. I see it. Go Birds. All right. I'm going to kick us off here. Welcome to today's webinar, Expanding Horizons, Searching for the Ideal Early Feasibility Study Location. I'm Vernon Baker, your moderator for today's session, a senior medical device guru here at Greenlight Guru. We're just going to do a little quick housekeeping before we dive into our presentation. First, we invite you to actively participate. A lot of you have already found the chat tab, but it is over to the right of the panel. You can chat with fellow attendees. Also note the Q&A tab where you can ask questions for the Q&A session later. Note that you can also upvote or thumbs up questions, and we will try to prioritize those that are most upvoted. So you can take a look at the QA tab, see what's there, and then give it a thumbs up for the questions that you're interested in hearing the answers to. Second, and I'll probably say this a couple of times, I'll be a broken record, we will be sending out the full recording and presentation slides to everyone who registered after the live event. So just watch your inbox for that follow-up email. It should come in an email. Takes a little while to process, but you should have that just shortly after the event. So look out for it. Okay. At Greenlight Guru, our mission is to improve the quality of life through our work in the medtech industry. And it's likely a shared goal of many of you who are here today. That's why you're here. We host these free webinars to share valuable insights and learn from top industry experts like our speaker today and to showcase our industry-leading solutions. So our software is designed to help medtech companies bring life-changing products to patients faster, more efficiently, and with less risk. And it includes software solutions for product development, quality management, and clinical data management that are all tailored specifically for the med device industry. So you can join over 1,100 leading medtech companies that trust Greenlight Guru by visiting greenlight.guru for your personalized demo after today's webinar. So now, without further ado, to introduce our presenter for today. Anna Nikitina is the head of business development and legal at Clinical Accelerator, a contract research organization, a CRO, specializing in conducting clinical investigations of innovative medical devices across all major therapeutic areas, with a particular focus on the cardiovascular field. Anna holds an LLB degree from University of College London, UK, providing a strong foundation in regulatory and compliance matters, and has spent 5 years working at Clinical Accelerator, handling legal oversight, business development, and clinical trial management of early feasibility studies and first-in-human trials with international medtech companies. So without further ado, let's get into today's presentation. Thank you, Anna, and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vernon, for that introduction. And thank you so much for having me today. It's a great pleasure to be here talking on the topic of early feasibility studies. So today, my goal is to provide you all with a comprehensive understanding of early feasibility studies, their significance, the challenges that they present, how to effectively navigate through them, and how to find your ideal EFS location. But before we dive into the specifics, first I'd like to start with the fundamentals and begin with a definition of what exactly EFS studies are and why they are important. So what is an early feasibility study? An early feasibility study is a limited clinical investigation of a device early in development. It typically enrolls a small number of patients, usually around 5 to 10, and these studies evaluate device design with respect to initial clinical safety and device functionality. Now, EFS studies are crucial because they serve as the first step in translating preclinical innovation into real-world application. And these studies, they provide immense value to many different key stakeholders. So beginning with study sponsors, with EFS studies, sponsors can use this data to assess the usability and performance of their device in a real-world clinical setting. Using this data, they can also identify potential modifications that may be required to their device to optimize implantation or delivery or durability of their device. This data can also be used to help refine then their device design. Can also help with validating endpoints and fine-tuning inclusion and exclusion criteria for later stage studies. And of course, this data is majorly helpful with raising your next series. But taking a broader perspective, EFS studies benefit many other stakeholders as well, beyond just the sponsor of the clinical trial. So you have patients first and foremost who are able to have access to novel treatments when they may otherwise not have suitable solutions. Clinical sites and investigators benefit as well because they're able to again have this access to novel treatments for their patients who may not have viable options, and it gives them an opportunity as well to be involved early in groundbreaking research, familiarize themselves with the device, and make themselves advocates for its future adoption. Regulators then also benefit because they're able to then assess the safety and feasibility of your device, and it helps build credibility to your device. And finally, investors also benefit, and ultimately you as a sponsor, because early clinical data, it is a significant milestone in the funding life cycle of a medtech startup. And strong EFS study results, they demonstrate proof of concept and provide confidence to investors who are often hesitant to fund development until they see this tangible human data. Great. Now that we've covered what EFS studies are and why they're important and all of the key stakeholders that are involved, the next important question to ask is, when should I start my EFS study? And the answer in short to this is as early as possible, once you reach the point where one, further non-clinical testing will not advance or benefit your device development. Number two, all expected device risks have been reduced as far as possible through bench testing, third-party testing, and any animal testing. And number three, clinical data is now required to move forward and progress. So once all of this criteria is hit, then you are ready to move on with your early feasibility study. So where should you conduct your early feasibility study? This is the main key point of this presentation. Well, EFS studies are a global business, really, and but selecting the right location can have a profound impact on the speed, cost, and overall success of your study. And today, companies, they have multiple options. So you have the United States, of course, and thanks to the FDA's EFS initiative, the US has become quite an attractive option for early stage studies. You have the European Union as well, which has traditionally been a very popular option, a very popular destination, although regulatory complexities have increased now with the introduction of the MDR in the last few years. And then you have other locations as well, OUS and OEU. So these are places like Australia and New Zealand. You also have Central and South America. And then places like Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So a couple examples would be Georgia and Uzbekistan. So these US OEU locations have become more popular recently because they offer more, often offer more streamlined regulatory environments. They have cost-effective aspects to them and have often high patient enrollment rates. So, but if we have so many different options, how do you choose the right location? Well, first, what you need to do is identify and evaluate the main challenges that arise with early feasibility studies. And then after you know the challenges, you can then analyze which location is best suited to overcome these challenges. So let's go through a few of them. I've listed a few today. So number one, although first-in-human and early feasibility studies are quite small in scope, they can still nonetheless be very expensive. And the problem is that investors, they're eager to see the results of first-in-human and EFS studies, but they're often not so keen to fund them. So you need this funding to cross this so-called valley of death between preclinical and clinical stages. And additionally, you can also have high regulatory and operational costs in certain countries, which can add to the challenge. Another challenge is the regulatory burden, which can be quite significant, although it does vary by geography, of course. But nonetheless, you have challenges in terms of the bench preclinical and V&V testing that you need to pass. And in many regions, the clinical trial approval process can also be quite lengthy and unpredictable. So the third challenge is finding the right sites and the right investigators for your study, which is critical to the success of your study. You need to select sites and investigators who have suitable infrastructure, clinical competence, access to patients, and are actually willing to participate in studies with novel high-risk devices. Because many leading clinical centers of excellence might be great at large industry-sponsored studies, but they can often be not the best choice for a smaller first-in-human study organized by a medtech startup, because these studies, they carry higher risks and require additional oversight. The fourth challenge is patient enrollment. It is not easy to enroll patients into studies with novel high-risk devices. It is often said that slow patient enrollment is the #1 cause of delays in clinical studies, especially when the inclusion and exclusion criteria are quite stringent. So it's very important that you're able to initiate your studies fast and enroll your patients in a fast and efficient manner. And the last challenge is obtaining, oh, one second, I have lost my slides. There we go. And the last challenge is obtaining clean and quality data. And this can prove to be quite difficult with the wrong partners. So you really need to make sure that the data that is produced out of your study is clean, it is of high quality, and is acceptable by all relevant stakeholders. So that means regulators, investors, and clinicians. So to ensure this, it is highly important that you engage with the right partners for your study. So having discussed the key challenges of conducting an EFS, let's now examine what exactly makes an ideal EFS location. So on this slide, you'll find some characteristics that you can use to help assess the locations that you might be considering for your early feasibility study. So let's go through them together. So your ideal EFS location should have a streamlined regulatory environment, which allows you then to enter the clinic early. Your ideal EFS location should have well-equipped clinical sites with modern good infrastructure and all of the relevant equipment and technology. You then in turn need to have enthusiastic and well-trained investigators who will be sure to actually deliver on your project. Your ideal location should have access to a well-characterized patient population to ensure rapid and efficient patient enrollment. Your location should have committed site leadership and on-site clinical trial support staff to help assist with coordination and execution. And finally, in your location, you should find and have access to a reliable clinical trial management partner to help with navigating the regulatory and logistical complexities, as well as ensuring that the day-to-day management during your study runs smoothly and that clean data is obtained. So all of these factors and characteristics together translate into fast enrollment, high quality data, and hopefully ideally reasonable costs as well. So now let's revisit some of the options we discussed earlier, some of the location options, and evaluate how they measure up against our EFS criteria. So starting with the United States, historically, the US was not a very popular location actually for EFS studies. Before 2013, medical device companies often tended to conduct their early stage research elsewhere because in the United States we had very long FDA approval timelines and very high costs. And in order to then in 2013, the FDA introduced their EFS IDE guidance, which aimed to streamline this process and overcome some of these challenges that were prevalent prior to 2013 and encourage innovation in the United States. The future, however, we have a slight caveat here. It's a little bit unclear now how things will progress under the recent new administration that we have. But focusing on the current EFS initiative that is currently in place, there are quite a few different characteristics and benefits to it. So under the EFS initiative, approvals are given in a more expedited manner now in comparison to prior to 2013 and in comparison to traditional IDEs. Approvals are granted on less preclinical data for EFS studies than required for pivotal studies. You also have access to the FDA, that you can have quite rapid dialogue between you yourself as a sponsor and the FDA during the review process. Under this initiative, the FDA aims to approve approximately 60 EFS studies per year, which is a quite considerate number. And the FDA aims to be quite efficient with having a target of less than 60 days for review. So they have this 60-60-60-day goal, which is illustrated in the little diagram on the right there. So this goal is to have 60 days to obtain IRB approval, 60 days for clinical trial execution, and 60 days to first patient in. And then we have some other advantages as well to conducting studies in the US. You have, aside from all of the benefits under the EFS initiative, you have this early engagement with the FDA. You, of course, also have availability to rather excellent sites. And you also have the English language, of course, being the main language within the country, and very easy travel for US sponsors, or perhaps even no travel, depending on where you're located and where your study center is. However, while there are a lot of advantages, there are still quite a few challenges that remain in the United States. So you have, nonetheless, lengthy contract negotiations despite the EFS initiative, which aims to reduce the time required to finalize contracting. You still have extended startup timelines, unfortunately. So studies can still often take 6+ months to reach first patient in, despite the 60-60-60-day initiative. You also have issues with patient recruitment, reimbursement issues, and nonetheless, costs still remain rather high, with the US being one of the most expensive markets for clinical research. The good news is that the FDA recognizes these issues and is currently developing an EFS 2.0 initiative in order to further refine the process and address these challenges that still remain. But referring a little bit back to the caveat, it's still yet to be, it is to be determined how this will progress now under the new administration. So moving on to the European Union. So for many years, Europe was a preferred destination for early stage research, particularly prior to the FDA's EFS initiative. Many companies turned to Europe for their early feasibility studies due to the stringent regulatory requirements and due to the less stringent regulatory requirements that they could find in the EU and faster approval processes. However, with the introduction of the MDR, regulatory complexity has increased, causing delays in such approvals. And additionally, each member state also interprets MDR differently, leading to inconsistencies in the approval process. And as a result, sponsors are looking for alternative, more predictable EFS locations. So to address this challenge, the EU has launched this HEU EFS project, which aims to create a harmonized framework for conducting EFS studies in the EU and to enhance Europe's competitiveness by streamlining regulatory pathways. But while this initiative is promising, it does remain in development, and many sponsors do continue to search for alternative global locations. And this is where locations OUS, OEU come into play. So quite a few different locations have become quite attractive for early feasibility studies due to their streamlined regulatory pathways, their lower costs, and faster patient enrollment. So we have a few examples here. So one is Australia and New Zealand, which have a simplified regulatory process under the clinical trial notification scheme that they have there. There are also R&D tax incentives in Australia, which allow for recovery of up to 43.5% of eligible trial costs, which is very good, although this does require you to incorporate a company within the country. And then, of course, the two locations have a very good reputation with English as first language and very good site infrastructure. Central and South America is another example which has a very simplified regulatory process, access to a large treatment-naive population, and you can find much more reasonable costs there, although this does come together with older infrastructure at study centers. Finally, there's also Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So that's places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, which have become quite popular. So here you'll find regulatory approvals within 6 to 8 weeks, high patient recruitment rates, quite modern site infrastructure, and strong investigator engagement in all therapeutic areas. These two countries also have a growing reputation for quality data accepted by international regulators. You do have direct flights from major US, EU cities, so that simplifies travel, although of course not as simple as if it's the study centers being within your own country. And the majority are English speaking. Now, I'd like to take a little time now to focus more on Georgia specifically, which has emerged in recent years as a popular location for both first-in-human and EFS studies, and discuss why exactly this is the case. So one of the biggest advantages of conducting EFS studies in Georgia is its streamlined regulatory environment. So we have a very short approval timelines of just 2 weeks being required for ethics committee approval, and then 3 to 4 weeks for regulatory approval. At the same time, site contracting can be conducted in parallel, and the overall startup period is approximately 2 months, which is quite significantly short in comparison to what can be found in the United States and within the EU. Georgia's clinical research ecosystem is also well established with a network of experienced and committed sites, very good infrastructure and equipment, dedicated clinical research coordinators which support patient recruitment, site management and compliance, very experienced investigators. And to date, over 150 EFS studies have actually successfully been conducted in Georgia, demonstrating its reliability as a premier research hub. Now, one of the most critical factors for any clinical trial is access to patients. So as we mentioned, the number one cause of delays is slow patient enrollment. And so Georgia excels quite well in this area. So sponsors benefit from quite a large accessible patient population, which reduces delays in recruitment. Many EFS studies are actually complete their enrollment in Georgia in just a few months, which is faster than traditional markets. Additionally, there's also quite a lot of flexibility that can be found in the countries in terms of accommodating sponsors' demands, including pre-screening very early. Sites often work on weekends, so you can schedule cases and group patients together if the procedures are elective. So really shortening the amount of time that a sponsor needs to spend within the country, economizing on both their time and their travel. And at the end of the day, A trial is only as valuable as the quality of data that it generates. So quality data is ensured by close CRO supervision, which can be found in Georgia. And the country also has a track history of company audits and regulatory inspections. So 24 FDA inspections have been conducted within the country, and all have ended in NAI, no action indicated. And this makes Georgia actually the only country in the world to achieve 100% NAI. And finally, there's also reasonable cost, which can be found within the country, making Georgia quite a top-tier location for EFS studies. Now for a quick overview of Uzbekistan, as well as a newer location that has come up, OUS OEU. So this is a relatively newer player in the early feasibility study landscape, but it has rapidly gained a strong reputation in the space and mirrors quite a lot of the advantages that can also be seen in Georgia. So we have similarly a very streamlined regulatory process with only National Ethics Committee approval required. These meetings are held monthly, and so study approvals can be, the whole study startup period can be achieved within just 1 month. You also have quite excellent actually, patient access, because the country has a population of almost 40 million people, and 3 million people alone living in the capital city of Tashkent. So this bodes extremely well for fast and efficient patient enrollment. Again, you have a growing network of committed sites supported by experienced investigators committed to high quality research, and also quite a good proven track record, although a newer one. In the past 2 years, for example, our company, Clinical Accelerator, has successfully conducted over 40 first-in-human and EFS studies in the country, showing its rapid growth. And then finally, we maintain this high quality data. So this is ensured by close CRO supervision, stringent site monitoring, and adherence to international ICH GCP standards. So when you get to the point of starting to think about your first-in-human and EFS study, it is very important to engage a CRO partner in your chosen region very early to assist you with setup and implementation of your clinical study. On this slide, I've just put a little bit of information about our company, Clinical Accelerator, and our areas of operation. So as an organization, our focus is on accelerating clinical development programs of medtech companies, hence the name Clinical Accelerator. And we do this through facilitating early entry into the clinic and ensuring fast and efficient patient enrollment. So due to all of the benefits mentioned in the previous slides, we personally choose to place our first-in-human and EFS studies in places OUS, OEU, in locations like Georgia and Uzbekistan. And then we also work in quite a few EU locations, but remaining within Eastern focus. So you can find those countries listed there on the left. So our network allows us to have access to 150 million patients spanning both European and Asian ethnicities. We have access to 60+ dedicated clinical sites with state-of-the-art technology and highly trained personnel. Our average timelines range from 52 to 90 days for startup, depending on the location. And in total, we've executed 200+ successful EFS studies from submission to completion. So if anyone's interested in having a conversation about how we operate in more detail or how we run our studies, etc., feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to share my email. Maybe it's already included at some point. So happy to have a chat. So how do we practically execute an EFS study? So here I'm just going to go through, walk through a little bit of a step-by-step process of the startup phase specifically. So the process begins with the sponsor company providing all of the study documentation required for submission. Most notably, this is the clinical protocol, which includes details such as the device description, risk management framework, procedure, patient population, and endpoints. Other key study documentation includes the investigator's brochure and from consent form and other auxiliary documents, but these are the main three that you would need to focus on. The sponsor, of course, also supplies the investigational product and ensures training and case proctoring for the study investigators is needed. Your CRO would then be involved and would work closely with the clinical site and investigator to ensure trial readiness. We would handle all of the submission process together with the sponsor and secure all of the necessary approvals. And then once we obtain trial approval, the study is ready to proceed and we move on to the final step, which is, of course, performing the trial. So to demonstrate how this process unfolds a little and some of the timelines that can be associated in places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, I have a couple of real-world case studies of clients that have worked with us in these locations that we can go through. So starting off with one of our clients' first-in-human studies in Uzbekistan. For the sake of confidentiality, I will not be revealing names today, but the target indication for this study was aortic stenosis, and the device studied was a novel TAVI device. And the trial size for this study was an N of 15. So some of the challenges that we faced included obtaining regulatory approvals very quickly to meet this very stringent first-in-human target date that the company had. We needed to use one single investigative site to reduce inter-observer variability. And we needed to identify suitable patients that met the very, very narrow inclusion and exclusion criteria. So to address these challenges, we took a few different strategic steps. Number one, we aim to maximize efficiency during the startup phase by handling the document review, translations, and site documentation collation very quickly and swiftly. We also engaged we had our own site management and patient enrollment organization who was engaged early to conduct vigorous pre-screening. So for this study specifically, 30 patients were pre-screened, 4 were confirmed, and 2 were implanted in the very early phase of the study. Now let's take a look at the study timeline achieved with our work model. So we saved the sponsor quite a significant amount of time with submission preparation taking just 25 days. The screening of 30 patients was completed in 60 days, and the time to first patient in was 60 days in total. So despite the challenges that we faced in this study, we were still able to rapidly activate sites and recruit all of the suitable patients within a reasonable time frame, aligning with the sponsor's needs. So here you can see just a little chart which shows you a direct comparison of our timelines that we achieved for this study with the ideal timelines that the US EFS initiative targets, with a key difference of when first patient in would be hit. Great. Now I have one more case study of another client that worked in Uzbekistan, and this time we can go just a tad deeper into the step-by-step process that was taken during the startup phase and enrollment phase. So this study was for an innovative resorbable embolization technology, which designed to relieve pain associated with knee osteoarthritis. So some of the key challenges for this study included identifying a modern cath lab with the right diagnostic and injection equipment. We needed, again, to use a single investigative site to ensure consistency and reduce inter-observer variability. We needed to find an investigator with experience with this specific and uncommon technology and uncommon access. And then we needed to find a site with an active database of patients with imaging in order to have rapid enrollment. So we approached these challenges by, one, conducting site visits to identify and verify capable investigators and facilities. In this case, several different sites were reviewed against the relevant criteria provided by the sponsor, and one specific site was identified as meeting all of the requirements and was pre-qualified. The site also had a good database of patients. The investigators were experienced, enthusiastic, and a reasonable study budget was quickly agreed in the study. Subsequently, our SMPEO, Site Management Organization team, was assigned to strengthen the site's human resources for clinical trial activities and to also assist with the site coordination and patient enrollment support. We provided a trial proposal and plan to the sponsor for approval, also in addition to ensure a smooth execution. So all of the essential documentation was reviewed for compliance with local regulatory requirements. In this study, the submission dossier was prepared in just 15 days and then submitted subsequently to the National Ethics Committee. The study was then approved, and the total study startup was concluded in just 42 days. The site was then initiated within just a few days of receiving all of the approvals, and first patient in was achieved exactly 1 week after study approval, resulting in a total time of 49 days to first patient in from the moment of receiving all study documentation and final versions. The patient enrollment of N of 15 was also completed within 80 days, which was in fact 90 days ahead of schedule, and there was a 0% dropout rate in this study. All the while, of course, intensive sponsor CRO communication was maintained throughout the study. The data was entered in full, verified promptly, and then based on successful implementation of this study, the sponsor then decided to extend this study and also start a new study with the same technology, but in a different indication. So this case study specifically illustrates, in our view, an example of what I suspect quite a few of you may agree is quite an ideal EFS scenario, with many of the ideal requirements at play, resulting in a very timely study performed efficiently and ending with verified clean data. So hopefully with these two example case studies, you can see better how an EFS study may unfold throughout the startup phase and how they can then be conducted efficiently, so that all key timeline targets are met and all patients are recruited efficiently. So this shows that by choosing the right location and choosing the right partner, you're able to leverage streamlined regulatory pathways. You can find well-equipped clinical sites, have rapid study startup times, accelerated patient enrollment, and then end with the most important point, which is the high-quality data. So now that we've explored a few different case studies of companies who successfully ran their studies OUS, OEU, an important question arises, and maybe a question that the audience already has in mind. What can I do with this data, OUS, OEU? Well, there's quite a few things actually that you can, quite a few number of ways that you can utilize this data. So number one, this early data from feasibility studies significantly de-risks your device, of course, and investors and stakeholders are more willing to support a project when they see validated early results. So with this strong data, you can then secure funding for your next study in the EU, in Western Europe, in the United States, or wherever else you're thinking of in your clinical strategy. Number two, as we all know, preclinical studies can inform you greatly about your device, but they do not replace in-human clinical studies. So your early clinical data may show that your device requires reiterations or improvements, and this can then help steer you in the right direction to then make those improvements and repeat then your EFS study with your Gen 2 device. Number three, in some cases, your early EFS study can actually be used for potential M&A opportunities. So quite a good number of our clients actually have managed to exit successfully solely from this early data that was acquired, OUS, OEU. And lastly, otherwise, you can, once you have this robust data, early data, you can submit this data and move on to initiating a larger EFS study in the US, in the EU, or move potentially even directly to pivotal, which has recently been suggested as an option by the FDA. So one of the common concerns that medtech companies have is whether the FDA will accept data generated outside of the US. So over the years, the FDA has become increasingly open to reviewing OUS data, actually. While the agency emphasizes the importance of US-based EFS, they do understand that there are various factors in play that may limit a company from conducting all of their testing in the United States. This is mainly the funding and the time required to get to that point. So at its core, the FDA is a consumer protection agency with a dual mission of both protecting and promoting patient health. People often remember the protecting part and forget the promoting part. They want companies to progress and succeed to further options for patient treatment. They're not in the business of ensuring companies make money, but that patients are receiving safe and effective treatment. And this has then led to the acceptance over time of OUS data. And I'll move to the next slide. So this topic was actually very specifically discussed recently at the London PCR Valves Conference back in November in 2024. This was discussed in an expert panel session. So the session was titled Turning Your Idea into a Market-Ready Device, Innovating MedTech. And the session focused on critical pathways for bringing devices to market, identifying barriers and opportunities for efficient development, emphasizing the role of EFS studies and first-in-human studies as well. And during this session, one of the participants was Changfu Wu, who was representing the FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health. And during this session, he provided further clarity on how you can integrate OUS data into US regulatory submissions. And the main takeaway point of his contribution was that data is data, and the FDA will look closely at all data, regardless of where it comes from. The key point is ensuring that the study design and data quality align with FDA expectations. So no matter where you decide to run your EFS study, what is important clearly is engaging with regulators early. So you should inform the FDA of your clinical trial plans and study design, even if your first in human or EFS study is OUS. You should, it's always a great idea to get their approval on your study design, and then you can leverage this early OUS data that you collect to obtain further funding and initiate a larger EFS pivotal in the United States. The FDA it's very accessible, actually, and it's never too early to talk to them. It's important that you engage early and often with them throughout the entire life cycle of your device development. And there are multiple modes through which you can approach them. There's starting with the simplest, so you can just have an informal chat with an FDA staff, just something non-binding at a conference, for example. So attending industry events and having these informal direct conversations with FDA representatives can help provide you with quite valuable insights into expectations and best practices. Moving one step up from that, you can have an informational meeting with them, and you can receive informal feedback on your device, and you can ask any other questions that you may have about your device or study design, etc. So before launching your study, this informal meeting can be quite useful to help clarify all of these questions, not just also about your study design, validation, and data collection as well. And then one step above that are, of course, pre-sub meetings. So you can have these pre-sub meetings to help align your expectations with the FDA early, and it ensures that your V&V testing plan, verification, validation plan, and clinical study design plan will meet all of the regulatory requirements. And this can then help prevent costly delays down the road. So, and by keeping the FDA informed about your clinical trial plans, this then allows you, even if your first in human or EFS studies conducted OUS. It can help build a stronger case for your study for eventual market entry, ensures that you're in line with all of FDA's expectations, and you can leverage this OUS data and have it be accepted very happily by the FDA. So on that note, I will conclude my presentation and would like to summarize with the following points. So number one, EFS studies, the EFS conduct is a global business. We've assessed quite a few different options today that are out there. You have the US, which was traditionally not a very good location and hasn't been increasingly popular due to the EFS initiative that was put in place. You have the EU, which was traditionally a very popular location and still is, although regulatory complexities have increased under the MDR. And then you have locations OUS, OEU, and these attractive locations have emerged and positioned themselves as very popular due to their streamlined regulatory environment, short startup timelines, fast and efficient patient enrollment. So all these options exist, but you need to take into consideration all of these ideal EFS factors when searching for the right site. When you choose a location, assess it against all of the criteria, see if it meets all of the challenges and is ideal, in fact, for your specific study. Number three, a good EFS location should advance you as a company to the next stage, whether that's securing investors, whether it means you improving your device and moving on with the Gen 2, or initiating later stage studies. Number four, it is never too early to start planning for your feasibility. So this means you should reach out to your CRO early and often to help with the preparation, the startup submission. And it also means you should talk to the FDA and other regulators early via informational meetings, pre-sub meetings, or as simple as just a casual conversation at a conference. And last point, number 6, regulators accept OUS, OEU data. What's important and is number one important is ensuring that your study is well designed and the data quality remains high. And with that, I thank you all for your time. I hope this presentation today provided you with a clearer view on how to navigate your EFS study and how to meet the end goal of streamlining your pathway to market and bringing your much needed novel technology to patients faster. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm an engineer coming from the sort of early R&D side of the house, so this was extremely informative to me to learn how this sort of early clinical phase works. A lot of it new information to me, so thank you for the great presentation. I think it was helpful to our audience as well. We're going to dive into the Q&A portion here. While I'm just giving this little spiel, I'd love you guys to take a look at the Q&A tab. Please upvote questions. We already have a number of questions on us, so I'll start sharing those to the screen. But if the audience wants to take a look, upvote, submit your own questions, and then we'll try to get Anna's input here. So I will start with the most upvoted question here. And it looks like there's several sort of related on this theme that we'll talk through. I'll share it to the screen. This is from Heather. It's for a device intended to be marketed in the US or the EU. How do you address differences in the target patient population when your early feasibility study was conducted outside of the US or outside of the EU?
So in this early stages, this is less of a concern. So first in human EFS study, the differences in target patient population is not assessed so much and is more of a concern for later stage studies. So when you're moving on to a larger EFS or a larger pivotal study where the number of patients you're recruiting is larger, then that is more of a consideration that you need to you need to take in.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. There's a related question, not quite as upvoted, but I wanted to share it because I think it's related. From Oana, can EFS studies be used alone for regulatory approval? So like a 510K de novo. So it's talking about using potentially an early feasibility study as maybe a pivotal clinical study. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this would depend a little. It potentially, but it depends on your device and your device classification. So this is exactly one of the reasons why it's important to talk with regulators early, because we as a CRO, our business is in clinical trial implementation. So we are not at liberty to give regulatory advice as to what is sufficient data or what is insufficient data. And so it's important you can talk to the FDA, have these early meetings, and understand what level of data they want from you in order for you to get to market. So depending on the device classification and what the FDA tells you, it is possible for your EFS to be sufficient, but it's really highly dependent by each project.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Yeah, very good. I like this next question because one, I was like very impressed by some of those timelines you shared. I mean, in my experience, things happen so slowly. And looking at like, what did you say, 52 to 90 days, you've got averages there in the 60s. I mean, I was just amazed like how to get it, first patient that quickly. So
Yeah.
particularly taking some of the top two there that you talked about, Georgia, Republic of Georgia and Uzbekistan. Are they also good sites for pivotal clinical trials? Are there any concerns with accepting that data in the EU?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the model here changes a little bit for pivotal because for when you're looking at this early stage study, so these first in human EFS studies where you have this 5, 10, 15, 20 patients, all of that data we have learned regulators are happy to accept entirely OUS, OEU. But then when it comes to pivotal, the FDA does want, if I'm speaking specifically about FDA and also in the EU, they want centers and a good proportion of patients coming from the United States or within the EU. But that does not mean that places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, OUS, OEU, cannot still participate. So this is often the pathway that some of our clients go through. So we'll work with a company early, conduct their first in human study entirely OUS, OEU. They then take that data and submit it and either move to the next stage, or they learn about their device, make some modifications, redo their study, and then they progress to the next stage and initiate this larger EFS or pivotal study in the United States and with centers there, but ask for those centers that were involved in their early stage research to continue contributing and participating. So they're already familiar with the device. They have experience. There's the relationships that are already established, and they have this fast and efficient patient enrollment there, so that can really help boost timelines. But you would not be able to do an entire pivotal OUS, OEU, and then submit that.
Got it. Okay. It can be a piece of the puzzle, but probably
Yes,
not the
exactly.
entire piece and maybe not the majority of it, but it can be part of it.
Exactly. Although having said that, there are no actual written requirements stating that you cannot. It is more just it's more of a known accepted rule. So again, this is another reason why you should talk with regulators early and often. So you can ask them all of these questions. You can, even prior to initiating your first study, you can go through your entire your entire strategy and life cycle that you anticipate. Speak to them, okay, we're planning on doing our first in human or EFS in Georgia. We're going to have 15 patients, and then we want to run a larger study in the United States. What percentage of patients would you like to see from the US, and how much are we able to enroll OUS? And then just follow their guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that encouragement sort of throughout your presentation, especially there at the end, to communicate with FDA about these things, because I feel like there's so much sort of like fear and uncertainty related to like, well, what's going to be good enough? What's going to be sufficient? And so I love the encouragement to talk to the FDA and establish those things early and really it sort of de-risk the process. There's a question related to that I'll share to the screen now from Dave, who's my near neighbor here in Pennsylvania in the US, but it's related to that, to talking to the FDA. He asked, what's the best way to have the informational or informal meeting with FDA sort of pre-Q sub because he's attempted it and has been told to submit a Q sub. So any advice or discussion there based on your experiences communicating with FDA?
Yeah, I mean, understandably, it's a large organization that there can potentially be issues with communication. So it would just be a case of having the right contact. So trying to find specific personnel within the FDA who are a little more accessible and open to having earlier stage discussions. So we can potentially talk about that offline and provide some
assistance there.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. I want to, if I may, interject my own question here, and then I'll of course continue with the audience questions. But if I'm sitting inside a med device startup and I'm wondering, okay, what do I need to have ready? Like, what information, documentation do I need to engage with a CRO like Clinical Accelerator to start looking at this? Like, to initiate a feasibility study, get an idea of the budget. Like, what would I need to come to you with to start the conversation?
Yeah, great. Well, this is something that can be done pretty early as well. I mean, ideally, you have all of your documentation ready, and then we can do a deep dive into a feasibility assessment, get commitment of sites very quickly, and provide you with a very detailed budget. But you can come early, so even if you don't have any documentation, if you just have a description of your device, a description of how you envisage the study design to be. If you have an idea of the number of patients you want to enroll and the period of follow-up, then that's enough to initiate an initial exploration and provide you with a bit of a ballpark figure. Also, we have a lot of experience running these studies. We've been in this business for 15 years, so there's overlap as well. So we can just extrapolate also from other similar studies and give you an idea. And then a little bit down the road, we can then reassess and see if there are any modifications. But this is a great thing to do early as well, because obviously one of the bane of medtech entrepreneurs' existence is funding and fundraising. And so if you talk to CROs early and you're able to get this ballpark budget early, it then gives you a better idea of how much exactly you do need to raise to get to your first in human.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that answer. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We had a question about another territory here, one we didn't talk about. What about the UK as a place to conduct studies? Can you share anything with us there?
Yeah, so I have slightly less to say on this study on this location, as we do not personally conduct studies within the UK. We are actually a UK-born company and born out of academia. And our managing director, he was a cardiologist who practiced in the UK in the NHS. It was a investigator himself on many clinical studies, but found that things are just a little bit slow there, although you do have a lot of very excellent centers. And so it depends on the connections that you have. If you have connections with a particular site and investigators that are committed to your study, it could potentially be done very well. You may have government support as well if you're conducting research there, because the UK is trying hard to further progress their status as a research hub as well. But I think that my answer will be limited to that, as we tend to focus more in Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting one. I'm going to share to the screen here. Just to give us a rough ballpark. So the question is, how much are the financial implications mitigated by going OUS? Can you indicate just a general percentage of cost reduction, or are the overall costs approximately the same? This is an interesting one. I know you probably can't give exact numbers, but I'm wondering, like, is it an order of magnitude? Is it 50%? I mean, I'm thinking running an early feasibility study in the US where costs are probably higher versus going OUS, let's say, versus Republic of Georgia or Uzbekistan, some of the top ones on your list. Like, how much cheaper are we talking potentially?
Yeah, I mean, it ranges, of course, on study by study and also the size, etc. So the best way would be to actually go through some details and prepare proposals, but can probably say definitely under 50% of the cost.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps,
Okay.
yeah,
So
and
very significant cost
potentially
reductions then.
going
I
lower
mean,
than
that's
that as well. Yes, potentially going lower than 50% of the cost. But I'll refrain from going too low.
sure, sure. We won't quote you on it. We won't hold you to it. But I mean, it's just interesting to know ballpark. Like that's a
Yeah.
very significant potential cost reduction.
Mhm.
That's still a helpful answer. So thank you for that. Um, I'll share this one. Well, it's part question, part compliment, and I agree with it. So, do you hold any events? I mean, this is you at Clinical Accelerator about EFS for companies that want to learn more. I mean, there's this event here, a webinar, but any other, maybe in-person events or other speaking events where companies can see the work that you do. And thank you for the fantastic and thorough presentation. I agree with that.
Yeah, actually, yes. So we as a company, we hold one yearly conference. So we initiated our first one last year. It was we held it in Georgia. It's called the Georgia MedTech Innovation Summit, and so it was focused on on cardiovascular space, but really open to all therapeutic areas, all companies, in different areas and different stages of the life cycle of their device. So our next one will be in October of this year, in the same place as well, in Tbilisi, capital of Georgia, and we'll be discussing different topics within the EFS space. Companies will have the opportunity to present their projects, and we as a company, we as mentioned before, we're born out of academia, so we have this strong focus within the academic space. So we have quite a few KOLs coming in to speak on different topics, and a good group of investors as well. So it's a nice small tight community who attends this, but could be interesting for anyone in the EFS space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll grab my ticket to Tbilisi. Is there any way to access any of that online or materials from your website? We can get some other
Yeah,
information. I assume you have some, newsletter or other events.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if there's anywhere I can just you can just check out our website, and we have on our website a page on the MedTech Summit and with some information about last year's and what this year's will look like.
Great. Yeah, I want to inject another question of my own, if I may here. So we talked a lot about like Republic of Georgia and Uzbekistan as sort of top countries. You mentioned OUS. What documents would I need for a submission in a place like that? You had a very helpful slide that sort of had the top few. I think it was like clinical investigation plan, investigational product. So I could have a look at that. But what are there any other documents I need for submission in a place like Georgia or Uzbekistan?
Yeah, so as mentioned, we're in quite a streamlined regulatory environment there. So it's three essential main documents that you need to focus on. So it's your protocol, your investigational plan, your investigator's brochure, and the informed consent form. And there are other auxiliary documentation that goes into the submission, but those are the three major ones that you can focus on. So if you have those three in place, then you're 80% there.
Yeah, great. Okay, very good. This is one of our earlier questions that came in. It's about, oh, where did it just go? It disappeared from my list. Well, I'll share a different one. Maybe it was withdrawn. Oh, there it is. Sorry, my bad. Here, I'll share it to the screen. From Michael. Given the issue of access to patients, can you comment on India? This is similar to the UK question, so sorry. Any comment on India as a possible location? Do you have locations there?
Yeah, we personally do not work in India, but have heard of quite a few companies working there. So obviously, very, very, very large access to patients because of the enormous population size that they have, and very good medics who work there, and you can find some good infrastructure. But I cannot comment on the regulatory process there, or the quality of data that comes out, but have heard of quite a few people going there.
Sure. Okay, great. Another question from me. So some of those numbers that you shared in the case studies, I mean, it's really incredible. Like I've said, I've not been directly part of it, but seen a couple clinical studies that really struggled with patient enrollment and extremely slow patient enrollment, getting very expensive. How are you encouraging or ensuring that fast and efficient patient enrollment that we saw in those examples? Like, how do you make that happen in these first in human studies?
Yeah, so well, great question. There's quite a few things that we can do. So as an organization, we work as a CRO and handle a lot of study management, but we also like to position ourselves as a patient enrollment organization specifically as well. So this means that we create recruitment and retention strategies that are tailored to each project in advance. So we look through any potential challenges that we may see with patient enrollment and try to think of strategies that we can put in place in advance. As appropriate and depending on the project, we can filter through hospital databases to find potentially suitable patients. And we aim to try and start the pre-screening process as quick as possible, so that as soon as we have approval, we can really get going as quick as possible. And additionally, if we have studies, for example, that have quite a lot of challenges in terms of finding patients, then we will perform outreach. So over the years, we've developed quite a vast network of sites and investigators. So we may choose one center to actually conduct the clinical study, but then we can outreach to other centers and other physicians and try to find patients at different centers and bring and pool them all to one center to perform cases at.
Yeah.
And then one other thing that we can do as well is, again, we've been working for many years, and similar projects arise over time. So we go through this pre-screening process for a lot of our projects, and there may be a patient that is a screen failure for one project, but may be suitable for another. So we keep track of everything, and so when we're starting to look for patients, we can look into that as well and see if we can take a patient who was already pre-screened for another project and but was for some reason a screen failure and can be very happily enrolled into another one.
Got it. Yeah, it makes sense to me. You've done it and know how to do it, know who to ask and where to go. Um, yeah, that's good. That's helpful. Okay, a couple questions from Sarah here. I'm going to share this one to the screen. I'll share her first question first. Any recommendations or tips on how to engage FDA on a potential strategy to go from OUS data, EFS, FIH data to US pivotal prior to starting or having the data from the EFS study? So in other words, how much of the pivotal study strategy needs to be vetted before approaching FDA? It's kind of an order of operations question on the regulatory strategy or the clinical strategy here, EFS to pivotal.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of goes back to my points about engaging with the FDA, that you should go as early as possible. So it's prior to initiating your OUS first in human EFS. You just go to them with your study design, and then if you've explored some locations, you can talk to them and say, okay, we're thinking of going here for our first in human or EFS. What do you think? How should we do it? And then how do you recommend we plan our pivotal? So you can come and just ask them the question. You may not even have a strategy ready. You just get their opinion if you already have an idea for first in human, and then how do they see, or how would they like to see you as a company progress, and which locations and would they like to see you go to. So just go early, and they're usually very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is I can start these conversations in parallel. Like I could contact you at Clinical Accelerator, also begin the conversations with FDA, start figuring out sort of the trajectory of my EFS, both with FDA and with a group like yours. And they can kind of develop in parallel, as well as the overall strategy to get to pivotal in the
Yes,
US.
exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. That's great. Thank you. Okay, another question from Sarah. Maybe this is related. Let me read through it. Any experience progressing or transitioning a US EFS to a traditional feasibility or pivotal study as suggested in FDA's guidance? Any value in focusing on US EFS from this perspective to reduce overall time to pivotal completion / market submission?
Okay, so yes, so as I think I mentioned a little bit before, so the one life cycle that's often the case with some of our clients is that they come to us early, we perform their first in human or EFS, OUS, OEU, and then they transition to this US EFS or pivotal study, and then maintain our centers involved. There's a few companies who have gone through this trajectory after first speaking to the FDA and kind of vetting the process and moving on. I have a couple of names in mind, but
Sure.
for confidentiality, I would need to double check disclosures.
No, understood.
Definitely have experience in this, absolutely, yes. In terms of value and focusing on US EFS, am I understanding the question correctly in that in focusing US EFS as instead of OUS to reduce overall time to pivotal completion? I'm just not super clear on this question.
Yeah, that's the way I read it anyways, and this may be wrong, is although let's say there's like significant cost advantages and all these efficiencies in doing OUS EFS, is there a counter advantage to doing it in the US because of the ability to transition into a pivotal trial maybe more simply, or leverage, like if you do your EFS in the United States, are there efficiencies also to be gained there in transitioning to a pivotal? That's kind of how I read the question.
I mean, yes. I mean, for sure. If you, in terms of relationship building, so if you have a center in the United States in mind that you want to run your first in human EFS at, and then you develop that relationship, and then you complete it, submit for pivotal approval, and then conduct your study there, then there's definitely benefit to that. The issue is just the cost that comes with that, and also the time that it'll take, and depending on the center that you choose as well, how long approvals take. So as I mentioned, they have this 60 day goal under the FDA EFS initiative, but the time to first patient in can often still take up to 6 months. So it's a question of, do you want to stay within one country and just build a relationship with a site over time, but have it be more expensive and take longer, or would you rather go somewhere else first, get this first data quicker, raise your next series, and move on to the next stage? So yeah.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, that's one of the values in developing the strategy, I guess, and having the conversations, really figure out those values, what's going to be the best fit for any given situation. But yeah, thank you. Very good. Oh yeah, and Sarah confirmed in the chat we interpreted the question correctly. So thank you, Anna. That's you answered it. Okay, we're down to the last question here. So it looks like we might be giving some folks some time back. And I think this one, actually, you may have covered it through your presentation. So it might be an easy one to end on. Any language barriers in these countries? Is English readily spoken? You sort of addressed that in some of your sort of territory by territory slides. Sound like, I think most of them you did say English is readily spoken, or you have solutions, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how you overcome or address any language barriers and where those challenges may exist.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's obviously if we're focusing specifically on OUS, OEU, which then in Australia, New Zealand, of course, for English as first language, so no problems there. In Central and South America, it'll depend. Places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, it becomes site dependent. Georgia is actually very good with English. Their former president was a former U.S. resident and really kind of pushed for English and within the country. So you hear it everywhere. It's not an issue. In Uzbekistan, it will depend on the center. So it's a case of choosing the right centers. And if you do have this language barrier occasionally, or it's never complete. It may just be, it's a second language. It's a little bit more difficult to speak. Our staff are always trilingual. So we're always there if needed for any help in terms of translation or anything, and we're there monitoring the whole time. And the study conduct, all of the paperwork is always done in English, so there's no
great.
translations that need to be done in that regard. So we handle all of the translations for of study documentation for submissions, but in terms of the actual study conduct documentation, everything is in English, no matter where we work.
Okay. Great. Okay, so reading between the lines, from a manufacturer's perspective or a medical device company that's in the U.S. may be worried about this, it's not something that they have to be concerned with, especially if using like Clinical Accelerator. Basically, no worries on translating documentation, working in languages other than English, because anything that does arise, you'll Clinical Accelerator will be there to handle it. Very good. Well, that was our last question. So I just want to reiterate, thanks. I learned a tremendous amount. This is not like the center of my competency. So I learned a tremendous amount. I really appreciate it. I think it was helpful for our audience. I know the slide presentation is going to be really helpful for folks to take back, share within their organizations. So thank you so much for your time, and your contact information is here for our audience members. I'll say one last time here that we will be sharing the slides and the recording afterwards, so look out for that email. And just want to thank everybody for their time today, and for you, Anna, thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to speaking with anyone who's interested.
Absolutely. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.